of American parents can't find licensed childcare. Businesses may even close because parents miss work to care for their kids. Wonder School can help solve that by making it easier for entrepreneurs to start in-home childcare businesses. Citi is investing in Wonder School to help offer more childcare options, which can help parents return to their jobs and help towns across America get back to work for the love of moving businesses forward, for the love of progress. Citi.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the PaleyFest Fall TV Previews. I'm Patrick Gomez, Editor-in-Chief at Entertainment Weekly, and I am so thrilled to be here for a special conversation about the upcoming teen thriller Goosebumps, premiering Friday, October 13th on Disney Plus and Hulu. And thanks to Citi, the festival's official card and official sponsor, for their help in making this program possible. Inspired by the best-selling book series by R.L. Stine, Goosebumps follows a group of 5 high schoolers in the small town of Port Lawrence as they unearth dark secrets linked to the tragic passing of a teen boy named Harold Biddle, 3 decades later. Without ado, I'd like to introduce you to some of the series creatives behind this new show. Executive producer Pavun Shetty, executive producer Conor Welch, costume designer Cynthia Summers, and production designer Dan Hermansen. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's super exciting to get to chat with you all. I'm just going to have a disclosure right up at the top. I was a huge Goosebumps fan. I would run to the Borders bookstore around the corner from my school. I think every Thursday night that the new one was there. And if it wasn't, it like ruined my whole weekend. So I just am very, very excited to get to talk to you all about this. And for those of you watching, we have a special little treat. If you haven't seen the series trailer, it can be found in the event description. So definitely go check that out. Maybe pause this for a second, go watch that, and then come up because Pavun and Conor, I want to start off with you all and ask, now that everyone's gotten a chance to see that trailer, if you could tell us a little bit more about this aged up version of Goosebumps that you all have created.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks first of all for having us. This is really exciting to get to talk about this with you. But yeah, so considering we're a couple movies and a television show already made from the source material, we wanted to make sure right out of the gates that our show felt really fresh and new and current, while still, obviously paying homage, to the source material, to the books that we all grew up and loved. And we also wanted to make sure that it was super grounded in real feeling, relatable teenage experience of high schoolers now, and as well as the experiences of their parents, and then sort of heightened by some humor and some scares and some sort of thrilling giant set pieces that hopefully will make it feel, cinematic and fun. But as you sort of alluded to, the show is about a group of 5 high school students in Port Lawrence, fictional town in Washington. Kind of from different walks of life, probably wouldn't hang out together, sit together at a lunch table, but they do intersect at a big Halloween party that's thrown in the outskirts of town and at the long abandoned Biddle house. And they find that after leaving the party, each are separately sort of haunted by different totems that they came across while at the Biddle house. And about halfway through the season, they realize that they must all be connected and decide to kind of come together to figure out what is going on and how to stop it. And along the way, they encounter kind of big, scary monsters and a possessed teacher, as well as the unveiling of a secret that their parents have been keeping for years that may have sort of set off all of these crazy events.
And you mentioned this book series has been around for over 30 years. Can you all tell me a little bit about where the inception of like, hey, let's tackle this property again, and what made you all want to be a part of it?
I can say for me, I like Conor, I grew up reading the book series and actually watched the 90s version of the TV show too. So for me, it was kind of fortuitous that when I started working at Original Film, which is my company, we had just produced the first Goosebumps movie. And we started talking with Rob Letterman, who directed it and is a super funny and brilliant guy, about what a new version of a TV show would be like. And we just wanted to do something that was super surprising and subverted expectations. So in the collaboration with Scholastic, who produces the books, we approached Nick Stoller, who's done Neighbors and Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and Conor works with him. And he co-created it with Rob. And all of us had worked together before, so it was a really fun process to do this version of it. And we just think it's kind of like a genre mashup that people haven't seen.
And for all of you, were you all bringing, Cynthia and Dan in here? Were you also fans of the book series prior to getting to work on this?
I was a fan of the books, but I was a fan of the books through my children. So multi-generational is exactly what these books are about. And yes, we read them. We were fans of them. We couldn't get them fast enough. And then I watched, I was also aware and watched the 90s version, which I actually really loved. It was really kitschy, but I really kind of loved it. And this is the opposite end of the spectrum of that, obviously, of that 90s version. It's really a lot more high tech. It's scarier in a real grounded kind of way, in a very, grounded, but also current kind of way.
Yeah, and likewise, I through my kids getting the books. I remember they'd have the scholastic book fairs at school, and they'd always come home with stacks of these things. And especially my older son would just tear through them. He just loved them, and was very thrilled when I got onto this project.
And like you, Patrick, I was a huge fan growing up myself, reading them, and then it was cool, 30 years later to have. Now my oldest daughter is reading them and just tearing through them every night. So it's really exciting and a first for me to get to make a show that we can watch together based on books that we've both loved separately. So that'll be rad.
I mean, I am going to tout the fact that having gotten to see the first couple episodes, it really does speak both to it is kid friendly while also 100% entertaining and honestly a little spooky to adults as well. I don't scare too easily, but this certainly had me spooked a couple times in a really great way. Conor, you earlier were mentioning kind of the broad strokes, but what can you tease for us in more specifics in terms of what we're going to see from the storylines of the series?
Yeah, totally. So as fans will know, and most of the audience probably, the original series was anthological. So every book was centered on different characters in different worlds. So too was the original television series. But ours is a serialized season that has the same characters throughout. And so the first 5 episodes focus on separate points of view of the 5 main teenage characters as they're haunted by different totems from some of the more popular books of the Goosebumps canon. So there's the Polaroid camera that predicts a horrifying future. There's the cuckoo clock that jumps you back in time. There's the mask that first emboldens the wearer and then starts to take over their life. They're the worms that sort of take over the host, and then a scrapbook that literally sucks you in. So they're all dealing with those sort of separately, but are kind of overlapping in their story as well. And then alongside of this is Justin Long's character, Mr. Bratt, who has recently inherited the Biddle house that's been abandoned forever from a long, distant relative of his. And at the very end of the pilot, he is possessed by the ghost of Harold Biddle. And that sort of leads to him being the antagonist through most of the series, and some really scary and really funny kind of physical comedy from Justin specifically.
What's funny is again, having seen it, it sounds like a lot, and yet it's also woven together effortlessly that it's a really captivating story. It's also like elements of almost like Lost, where you're like, once you realize the convention, you're going back and like trying to be like, okay, well, what was going on with that person when we kind of just saw them in the background, and now we're getting to know what was going on there. It's super fascinating, and had to, I'm assuming, been difficult to piece together in terms of the editing and all of that, but it really does come together just beautifully.
There is a lot of stuff. I mean, it's not only the stories that Conor mentioned and what you mentioned with like time travel and flashbacks, but there's also, we're trying to do these Easter eggs from the books and plant different seeds so people who are fans of the original books like you would kind of pick things up. So those were throughout the entire series. But ultimately, I think the most important thing to us was that it felt like the issues that the kids and parents were dealing with were real issues, like that every kid and every parent feels like they deal with, and that it felt authentic. Because I think otherwise all the crazy stuff that's on there and all the time travel and different episodes like doesn't really land unless you have that. So it was nice to be able to just work with a cast who kind of was young enough to actually embrace those issues and have that. And they were funny too.
Totally. And the books never talked down to the kids. It felt like really you were in their shoes. And so that was sort of some of the magic that we really felt we needed to capture for this, that we were not patronizing or talking down to these teens, but really sort of illuminating their experiences, but sort of in a more heightened way.
Pavun, you just mentioned the cast. I'd love to, and Conor, you just were talking about Justin Long's fantastic performance, which is true. It's hilarious as he starts to adapt to his new reality. But talk to me a little bit about putting together this cast and making sure that they were the right ones to tell the story.
I mean, again, like we read a lot of people for the roles. I think to us, it was just important that people felt real and that they were funny, because this is a real comedy with frightening elements. We had talked about Freaks and Geeks a lot. That was our touchstone, is Freaks and Geeks with a lot of frightening elements. And a lot of that comedy comes from being an awkward high schooler. And so we just wanted to see that with all the cast that we had too. And I think that was really important to us. I mean, we always joked that the kids on the show are dealing with crazy things like haunted cameras and giant worms, but actually the scariest thing is being a kid in high school today. Like, that's scarier than any of this. And we wanted to see that in the cast that we kind of auditioned, and they all had that.
Another major character is the setting of this. The series takes place in Port Lawrence, which is a fictional town in the Pacific Northwest. Dan, could you talk to us a little bit about the choosing of that setting and what that brought to the story?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think originally it was written just as a typical small U.S. American town. And I think when the decision was made to shoot in Vancouver, we felt that embracing the Pacific Northwest flavor would allow us, to utilize some great locations and give Port Lawrence sort of an interesting but sort of grounded character. And one of my favorite locations was that illustrates this was a marina we used for the Harbor Stop Cafe, where Nora and Lucas sort of work and live, and that was sort of I think one of the best sort of examples of sort of utilizing some locations here in Vancouver to feel like we're on the coast.
It gives it the perfect kind of foggy vibe that works
totally
for this
That's
story.
yeah. Like what Dan did so well is like, that's such a beautiful location, but it can be the scariest location at the exact same time. When the sun's out, there's a beautiful lake and these old trees, and when the fog rolls in, it's this inescapable quality, and that's what is just so dynamic about the location.
Equally important are what these characters are wearing. So Cynthia, I'd love to hear a little bit about what it was like to put together the wardrobe for this show, and maybe some of the inspirations that you took to get to the outfits you chose.
I think, like Dan was saying, we're set in the Pacific Northwest, sort of north of Seattle, if you will, and but in a small town. So we really wanted to reflect what that looked like, what that looks like now. And also, we go back to 93, which is really fun, with the parents as young adults. So I think one of the biggest sort of things we had to think about was 90s fashion when we shot this was really popular. So we wanted to make sure we had the distinction of real 90s and then current day, and how the 90s was influencing today, and make sure that there was, that distinction. So that was fun. That was getting into all the different characters. They're really well written. We know them from the books. We've got all of these different sort of demographics working within our kids. It was really fun. It was really fun, and it was really fun just trying to sort of hit the character accents on each of the cast as they came in.
Yeah, you mentioned the 90s. I was grateful for the kind of chirons that let you know, because it's true, like even down to the hairstyles and such, it could have been very easy to get those confused, and you are very clear in which is which. What was it like to actually get to recreate the 90s aspect of it, and the authentic 90s aspect of it, I guess I should say?
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun. Of course, it was hard in that we need multiples for everything, because everybody is stunted on this show. There's so much going on, and we decided early on that our sort of patina for the 90s was what it was, which was the patterns were a little dustier, a lot of color blocking, sort of hangover of acid wash from the late 80s was still sort of lingering with us. So we really wanted to make sure we had a dustier palette, whereas the current 90s, or the current when we shot this 90s, is the colors are a little clearer, a little brighter. And that was one way that we could sort of differentiate between the decades, which was great. And also hair, I think hair is different now than it was in the 90s. So that kind of saved saved me in a big way as far as making the transition between these decades of 90s inspired fashion.
Cynthia was coming off a small show called The Last of Us, so it was nice for her to jump into something that had more bonkers nature to it. So
yes, yeah,
different vibe, yeah. But it was also
different
fun to
vibe.
use music from our wonderful music supervisor Manish, that like, you know, so we could have some '90s tracks that, you know, Pavun and I grew up with, matched with some contemporary music that my kids are now growing up with, and obviously we know. So that was a fun way to differentiate too, and play into a little of the nostalgia that makes it really fun.
There was, you know, everyone is doubled, and there's a lot more to consider than just I need to be able to walk down a school hallway in this. What did go into kind of putting together the more complex outfits for the more complex scenes?
I mean, for some of the things we actually built, like our mascot, who also had a stunt double for the mascot, that giant head we built that was so fun. There's some things I guess I can't talk about yet, but definitely some of the characters go through a lot of stunts coming up, really fun stuff. So a lot of it we had to build, which is fun. So that's always sourcing fabric and fittings and, you know, dyeing and distressing. We also have Harold Biddle, who starts off, like you see in the pilot, new and living in the 90s. And then, of course, later he's not. That was really fun to sort of deconstruct him and make him look, I don't know how much I can say, but make him look like what he looks like post-death. And scary as he was. That was a lot of fun, a lot of breakdown, and a lot of different components go into that. And then just, yeah, multiples of everything. So that involves shopping or building, making sure what we needed, and that everything fit everyone and everything worked in all of the elements, because we shot a lot outside. And that everybody also stayed warm underneath everything that they were wearing outside.
I'm sure the cast appreciated that very, very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've alluded to, you know, the supernatural elements here, and the people in the afterlife and such. So talk to me a little bit about the special effects that went into this show, and how those how you kind of came together with the visual language of those, and how much of that's a part of the show just as much as everything else we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of visual effects, and we're lucky that Rob Letterman, who directed this, is kind of master and had a really specific vision going in. I mean, he did the first movie, and I think it was important to all of us that it wasn't like a super CGI heavy show, that all of the effects that we had felt pretty practical, and that they felt that they were in the world and part of the world. Because it's not really a monster show. It's a show about these kids getting frightened by these hauntings that are happening in the town. And I think the realer they feel to the kids, the realer they're going to feel to the audience. So it's not like there's massive effects that we needed to blanket the whole show with, but there are little things that we sort of tuck in here and there that really haunt our kids.
Well, part of the haunting is, or at least creep factor of the show, is the Biddle house. Dan, would love to hear about putting that together and kind of making it its own character in the show.
Well, it's a bit of an adventure, the Biddle house, but because we'd originally had found a location, and I had a whole set design. It was an old mansion, and then we lost that location and had to pivot very quickly. But I think happily for our show, we found another great location in this house. It's an old mansion, or really building styled after sort of Scottish hunting lodges. It was built in the 30s, and so it sort of had its own sort of unique character, and we just leaned into that. I think we basically copied that location with all the dark woods and everything. Really helped build the sort of the mystery of the house, and I think just emphasized some of that history with, you know, hunting trophies and things like that in the set dressing. We sort of really sort of implied the mystery that the house provides throughout the whole series, actually. So yeah, that was very serendipitous sort of location we found that really sort of built the mystery around that house.
You mentioned kind of the set decoration and such. I'd love to hear from all of you if there's certain props or set pieces that I mean, you don't have to admit to taking them home, but were there some of them that were your favorites that you were able to use throughout the series?
all the totems. A lot of work went into that, and I think the audience people who are familiar with the books will it'll resonate with them because it's pulled from popular stories. So with working with the props department and set deck, we sort of built these, the clock and the camera and the mask and all these things that I think play a key role in our story, and but will also be familiar to sort of readers of the books.
It was fun.
I didn't take any home.
Yeah,
Sure.
It was fun watching the cast actually handle a Polaroid camera, like an actual one from the time period appropriate, because they had no idea what it was at all or what direction it was forward or backwards. So
Totally. And there is an epic set piece that I won't speak too specifically to it so as not to give spoilers, but it's from the book Go Eat Worms and involves a very disgusting and horrifying culminating event that I think people will be talking about for a while.
And Cynthia, did you have one?
As far as props go, I was enchanted by Biddle's book that he doodled in, because we worked really closely with the amazing props master on this show. And so I saw it sort of during its the building of it, because she would come by and ask about some things that we were doing, any pieces that we might have that she might be able to reflect in the book. So I don't want to say I had a hand in it, but it was really nice to be sort of witnessing as it evolved. And it's so full and rich. And I think if I would take something, maybe it would be that, but I didn't take anything.
Again, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this next question comes from our festival sponsor, City. What do you find most challenging or exciting about the mixing of the genres of spooky and comedy together? Obviously, you mentioned finding a great cast, but what excited you all about that fusion the most?
Stoller and I work mostly in the comedy space, so that's sort of our creative language. But it's true that comedy, or a joke and a scare, has a very similar rhythm and cadence in that it's set up and then surprise. And so I think Hillary and Rob and Nick did a really excellent job of sort of toggling between the two of those throughout the season. So sometimes when it was building to what you expected would be a scare, instead it was a laugh. Or, if you thought that it was a setup for a joke, we would spook you. And so, I think they did a really awesome job of sort of harmonizing those two to create a tone that I think is unlike, kind of anything else that's out there in a really exciting way.
For each of you, you've spoken a lot about why the series meant a lot to you walking into it. But now that you're actually getting to see these episodes, and it's getting closer to it being out into the world, I would love to hear have you had a moment to look back and, as Conor was mentioning, realize you're now part of something that the next generation will remember as their Goosebumps entry point, perhaps, or at least a companion piece? Has that I'm watching Cynthia right now the most, kind of reflecting on that. So I'm going to go to you first, but what is it like to know that you're part of the Goosebumps legacy now, and what are you hoping audiences will take away the most from this series?
Wow. Well, I'm just thrilled because, first of all, it feels like we've been away from each other for so long. So it feels like a long time ago that we did this. So part of seeing two of the episodes today just brought me right back to it. And knowing that is what my children, and I'm going to say grandchildren now, are going to see, because I have grandchildren, really makes me happy, because we don't always make things that, are child friendly or teen friendly, and just to be able to be a part of that with them and relive the past, exploring the books. I'm really, really excited. I'm super excited. And I think that it'll draw in a new generation. I really do, because I think that you guys all have really just tailored this to the future. And I think that's important when you're building on a past. So I'm really excited. And now seeing everybody today, I'm even more excited. So
how about for you, Dan?
It's definitely a privilege, and in the process of making this, I was obviously aware and familiar with the book series and the role it played in my own kid's life, but just talking to so many people, 20 somethings, 30 something, everybody had had related to it, and was familiar with it and had a special place in their heart. And so I just, felt hopefully everybody watches this and really enjoys it, because I think we were sort of tried to be faithful to the character of the books, but also bring it more dimension, I think, with the sort of the intertwined storylines and sort of building that world out. It's just being part of that. It was a meaningful process, just even in the making of it, and talking to people who had a special place in their heart for this book series.
Pavun, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, Goosebumps is a huge brand, right? It's a huge global brand. It's one of the best-selling book series of all time, like you said. And so everyone's got different views on it, from kids to adults. And I just hope that people watch it and are surprised. R.L. Stine created something that is just beloved by everyone, but everyone's got a little different story on how they got into the book series and when they started reading it, and if they watched the original TV show and if they watched the movies. And so there's a lot of views on Goosebumps going into it, and I just hope we surprise people. I think that we took what R.L. Stine created, and we have it's evolved in what we put together, and I think people are going to be pretty psyched when they watch it.
It certainly does feel very now. Conor, how about for you?
Yeah, I as a gigantic fan of the books growing up, I'm just thrilled to be in any way affiliated with that legacy. But really the biggest thing for me is that I made something that I'm very proud of, that my kids can watch and that we can watch together, which is a first and something that's really exciting. And I think, what we endeavored to do was capture the magic of the book that I think of the series, which I think was a little bit scarier and a little bit funnier than anyone expected when they opened that first page. And I think that we did deliver on that. So I'm very proud.
Well, you should all be very proud of all the work you did. And thank you so much for joining us and discussing all of it. And thank you everyone for watching and joining this Goosebumps PaleyFest Fall TV Preview panel. And remember to check out the first 5 episodes of Goosebumps beginning Friday, October 13th on Disney Plus and Hulu. And thank you once again to City for their support. And you can enjoy more of these programs by clicking the subscribe button below. Bye.